Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Three Churches videocast. This week we're giving our three churches a break after Easter to let things settle down and think about how they do discipleship, so tune in for that next week. This week we have a special episode. I was thinking about taking a sauna. I don't know if you guys like being in a sauna, but I think it's one of the greatest things that we do up here in the north, where we get really hot and we get really sweaty, and then all of the impurities come out of us, and then we wipe them off and we deal with them so that we can be clean, and not just like surface clean, but like deep clean in our pores. You might wonder why I'm talking about a sauna. That's a good question. I think sauna is an illustration for what happens when things get hot. When things get hot, when there's the impurities come out of us. And in a crisis, sometimes things get hot. Right now, I think we all feel like some of our impurities are maybe a little closer to the surface. That we maybe notice things in our hearts coming out at our family or friends or people close to us. In a crisis, things are hot. And when things are hot, things come to the surface. Culturally, broadly, one of these things that has come to the surface as this crisis has gone on, as things have gotten hot amongst us, is racism, prejudice. And this week it's my pleasure to have three of our leaders from River Life Church, that's Pastor Greg's church, come with us to share about their experiences of how they're experiencing racism in the midst of this. 1,100 physical and verbal attacks have been self-reported since late March around our country. And that's just reported, and that's during a time of self-quarantine. So it's actually a pretty astounding number. It's hit our Asian American brothers and sisters really hard. And in this moment, as we hear these stories, my challenge for myself and my challenge for you is to consider what impurities in our hearts might be coming to the surface. The good thing about our impurities coming to the surface, about how we understand race or culture or people who are different than us, is when they come to the surface and when we see them, and when we see that impurity, we can actually deal with it. It's actually God's gift to us when we see that rise out of us, because it was in us all along. And to truly be kingdom people, we have to address these deep, deep issues. So my encouragement to you would be to take this time. It's important. These are people who are part of our family, to sit and to listen and to understand what they're going through in the midst of this epidemic. Hey everybody, welcome again to Three Churches videocast. This week we're talking with leaders from one church, and that's the church we've had Pastor Greg on the last few weeks. And this is Pastor Greg's church that I also attend. And just so honored and blessed to have three of these high quality Asian American leaders come to share with us about what's going on in their community. And so these are three of my favorite people, and love the way that they do life and ministry. And so I'm just really great that I get to share them with all of you today. So I'm going to do brief introductions. Pangfula, why don't you start?
All right, good morning. My name is Pangfula Young Rhodes. I am Greg Rhodes' wife. Greg and I planted River Life Church in 2014. And I serve as the spiritual growth director here at the church. In my spare time or outside of the church, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Awesome. Thanks. Alicia Tao, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am the Community Engagement Director at River Life Church, and I run different ministries working with the homeless, refugee population. We run a food show as well. And during the day for my full-time job, I'm a work comp examiner for the League of Minnesota Cities.
Awesome. Great to have you here. Kong Mua, introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kong Mua. I'm the associate pastor at River Life. I've been with River Life for about 3 or 4 years now. Started off with youth ministries, continued to assist with youth ministries, and the last year and a half been diving into, or last half year, been diving into a lot of pastoral responsibilities at church and loving it. Outside of ministry, I'm also a marriage family therapist, and so I do mental health work with kids in the schools, and so that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So great to have you all with us. I shared in the introduction, but today we're going to talk about some of the impurities that have started to rise to the surface in our culture, and it's been primarily geared towards Asian Americans. There's other racial incidents that happen, and we don't minimize any of those, but today that's what we're talking about. And so, Alicia, we're going to start with you, and you're going to, if you could just share with us kind of big picture, what's going on. A lot of us are blind to this. Maybe we saw a headline about it, and a lot of us are maybe a step or two removed from what you're seeing. So could you share with us maybe the big picture of what's going on in terms of Asian American racism?
Yes, thank you. So the Asian American experience has significantly shifted since COVID has hit America. There has been an increase in physical assaults, verbal assaults all over the country. It is seen in the news, social media, and then we hear personal stories of how many family members and friends have experienced this themselves. The symptoms, honestly, of racism towards Asians have fully manifested itself. Key leaders, including the media and the US, has called COVID-19 the Chinese virus, irresponsibly moving the blame onto Asians and making us a target. Yes, it did originate in China, but to expand that blame onto us as if we had equal responsibility is wrong, misinforming, and ignorant. In the month of March 2020, there were over 1,000 incidents of racism reported because of COVID-19. That's why there was a group of people that got together to create Asian American Christian Collaborative. There was an urgency that needed to be addressed right away, and because there was an increase in violence towards Asian Americans. The church has generally been silent on justice work in general, but these Asian leaders decided that it was time to stand up for Asian Americans. They put together a statement within 2 days for Christians to sign and to say that we will no longer be silent, and to petition for the Christian church to stand up together and say, let's address this evil together through the various ways that we are able to do so. So it is not just happening in Minnesota, but it's happening across the country.
I'll put a link to that statement in the post on the video for this. Was happy to sign it when it came out to try to stand in solidarity. So thanks, Alicia, for giving us that broad overview. Let's take this a little bit closer to home. Pang Fu, let's start with you. How have you or the people close to you experienced this in this time of COVID-19?
Yeah, I'll start with my personal reactions. I came over to the U.S. as a very young refugee. I turned 5 when we arrived. And so, growing up in the system, in this country, I experienced racism early on, where I would be, called names, or I would be followed in the stores. But that died away maybe within the first 5 years for me. And so fast forward 40 years, and here we are experiencing it again. And for me, it's a cognitive dissonance where I had gotten to the place of comfort, thinking that we were beyond that, and that I had somehow done a good job of assimilating or integrating into the mainstream society and fitting in. And so I think that for me, it was a personal, just kind of a wake up call. Like, has there always been racism and I was just kind of not aware of it? Have I been deluding myself? So there's a sense of identity questioning that's happening for me. And now I'm very vigilant when I leave the house, whether it's just to, get groceries or even when I'm out taking a walk. It's gotten to the point where I don't go out by myself. I always want Greg to be there with me, particularly if I'm walking in the neighborhood. If I'm out in public where there are a lot of people, I'm not as fearful, but I've definitely been more afraid to be in public by myself. And I think for me, the experience of questioning who am I and what's my place in society, that has been unsettling for me. In many ways, it's confronting my own prejudices. I would have to say that the fear in me is that I will strike back. I mean, as a young child, there was no way that I could speak back to people who were calling me names. But as a grown up, as an educated person, as someone who has some amount of authority and influence, there is a part of me that just wants to fight back. And so that too is something that I'm grappling with, is just seeing that evil that is also inside of you. And I think that has made me more scared than anything.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Kong, what about you? How has this affected you?
I mean, definitely there's the heightened sense of being alert of surroundings whenever I'm out in public. I feel like I'm more vigilant outside the house, and so just aware of what's happening around me, in front of me, behind me. Just thinking of, okay, um, what's the best way in and out if I need to make a run for supplies or whatever. Early on when stay-at-home policies were put in place, I would try to make minimal eye contact out in public. I would try to make trips as quick as possible. So go in, pick up what I needed, and then leave. And so those are some things I've experienced. I know families around me have experienced getting their cars egged. And so over on the east side of St. Paul, I remember a couple of weeks ago, there was just a string of people I knew who were getting their cars egged. And although there weren't, there's no proof that these were, that these cars getting egged were a result of racism. It just felt like, in light of the context, in light of what was happening, in light of the atmosphere surrounding Asians and COVID-19, for me, I couldn't stop but wonder, like, are these racist acts? And so, and likewise, in my own experience of going to the stores too, whenever I'm in the stores and someone sees me and it feels like they jump like 6 feet away from me, or they're surprised by my presence, for me, I can't stop thinking, is it because of my skin color that they're doing that, or is it because they're being safe? And so, thankfully, I haven't experienced any direct racist acts or racism, but whenever I do experience these things, it makes me wonder, like, is it because of my skin color? And so that's just something that I can't stop pondering whenever I experience these situations. And so those are some of my personal experiences in light of all this.
This whole thing is like hard enough, like it's hard enough to be going through this. To add this extra layer of unsureness and vigilance on top of it, it's just heartbreaking. Alicia, can you share a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so I think most of us can agree that we have experienced different forms of racism our entire lives. In middle school, I remember kids throwing rocks at me because I was Asian, and as an adult now, it looks different. It's turned into microaggressions within the work environment. Since COVID has made itself at home in the US, with leaders calling it the Chinese virus, this has become like the tipping point, almost giving this invisible permission for someone who's racist to be brave to speak out their hate, which stems from their own biases and ignorance. It's caused emotional fear, shame, anxiety. We're now changing our lifestyles and habits to live in fear. Our awareness is heightened. Ming and I carry pepper spray with us in our pockets when we go walking for easier access. We can see shifting eyes when we're at the stores, kind of like what Pinkful and Kong were both sharing. Sometimes I feel like the hate from people, I can feel it in my body when I'm walking around the stores. And then we worry about our parents who might not know how to protect themselves, who have become immune to racist slurs because they were the first generation here in the US. And it's exhausting to live this way for me. A couple weeks ago, I had a phone call, and there's a family that lived down the street. They're Hmong, and they were at a church for a time frame. And she called, and she was kind of in a panic, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm okay. What's wrong?" My mom just got mugged, and she's not doing well. And I said, well, nothing has happened to me yet in this neighborhood. Is your mom okay? And she said, yeah, she'll be fine. But, she was afraid for me. So she called me and asked me if I was okay after her mom got mugged. And it shook me a little bit, because that was just 2 blocks down from my house. And whether it was just a plain racist act or whether it was related to COVID, it's so hard to separate it. That's how complex it is. You don't want to label everything as, this is COVID, this is not, but that's just life. That's the fear that we live in, is because we look different, we're going to experience life a little bit differently.
This is just so important for us to hear. And as I'm listening and thinking of you all as River Life Church, part of the North Central District of the Christian Missionary Alliance, you are part of our family. You're a beautiful part of our family and a necessary part of our family, because our goal is to reach every man, woman, and child with the good news of Jesus and have our lives be transformed by that. And if we're going to reach every man, woman, and child, there's a whole bunch of Asian people that are part of that. There's a bunch of African American people, African people, all sorts of different people. And so if we're going to really be the family God has called us to, we have to deal with some of this stuff inside of us. And so this whole context of how we're going to talk about this next part is in terms of family. Like, you guys are part of our family. Like, we're family together. You're speaking to your district family. We want to know how this is affecting you, because if one part of our family is hurt, or part of our body is hurt, we want to be able to be part of the solution. And if there's even things that we're doing that are harming that part of the body without maybe our recognition of it, we need to be aware of that, because we need that to be brought to the light so we can deal with it, because we don't want to harm our own body that we're part of. So we're going to do 2 questions here. The first one, Kong, this will be you. You can go first here. We're your family. We're your district family. We're dealing with this. As your district family, what is one thing you really want us to know about this whole thing and how you're dealing with this?
I think along with the heightened sense of feeling anxious, it creates tension with others, and so it shows up in different ways. And so my experience, again, creates anxiety, sometimes increased anxiety, and this will affect me personally, it will affect those around me. It shows up with me getting frustrated with my family members, the people I live with. Again, it's just a sense that that regardless if it's explicit or implicit, there's just a negative effect upon me that affects others. And so, for example, like an experience I had was in going to making a shopping trip. My anxiety of my wife's well-being caused me to get upset with her because she took a longer time than I did in picking up stuff. And so it affects me, affects those all around us. And so that's just one thing that I've realized that I want others to know, that again, it just doesn't impact me personally, but impacts those all around me of how I feel.
That's good. Alicia, what do you want us to know?
I want to share that when we step out of our house, we are aware that our hair is black and that our eyes look different. Some of us are bilingual, and we know that most of the time we bring our worldview with us to our workplace, to our church, and to our schools. We have to work twice as hard to fight for us and our families. We have to learn to be brave with our words. When someone spews racist slurs towards us, We cry in silence in the work bathroom and then wipe our tears and let the microaggression slide. I've done that before. We don't like to rock the boat because it's risky for us. Will there be retaliation if I speak up? Will there be a disbelief if I share how I've been treated? If I do advocate for myself, will I be shunned? It's hard. There's a lot of information going through our mind before we even decide if we want to take a stand or say anything at all. So we're doing all this processing in our brain when this act has already happened. So by the time we're ready to address it, it's already passed. And so then it almost seems as if it's too late now, or it's, you know, can we just move on with this? And I get a lot of that back and forth feeling. I'm still in the present. People want me to move on because this has already happened. And, you know, there's no point in talking about this any further. So sometimes it feels like I'm always kind of hitting a dead end, and then I close the box and we move on with life.
Thanks for that insight, Alicia. Pangfua, what is it you want us to know?
First, racism is a double-edged sword. For the victim of any racism or discrimination, it is really hard to not fight back with the same kind of racism. I mean, my fear when I'm walking around shows me that I'm discriminating against people. I'm looking at people thinking, you are about to call me a name, or you are about to move out of my way just because of the way I look. And so my response to racism is to also become racist. In fact, that is a horrible thing. It perpetuates itself in a circular way, and that I really don't like at all. And so my fear is that I'm going to start treating my brothers and sisters in the Lord with fear and with anxiety, and then finally with contempt. And ultimately, that's what racism is. We put people down just without knowing their history, without knowing them at all. And that's what I'm beginning to do, and that's what I'm trying to fight against. The second thing I want to say is that I feel most hurt by Christians who are racist, because it goes against everything that I believe we should be in the body of Christ. So then I'm even more taken aback by that. And I know that being Christian does not at all exempt us from being racist.
Yeah. That's a really good word. Thank you all for that insight, and we will take your words to heart and listen and hopefully understand better. And it is important for us to know some things, but it's also might be important for us to do some things. And we're part of the same body. We're part of the same family. We are your family members here at the North Central District. We're bound together by our Lord Jesus. And so I'm going to ask maybe a harder question for us, and maybe for you as well, because we don't always know how to be family, especially when it comes families. You know, we don't like to talk about money or sex or racism. Probably these are hard topics for families to talk about. So we're kind of pulling the scab off the open wound here and just kind of talking about it. But I think it's important for us to hear what you want us to do. Are there things that we can do? And I know that's a hard question because we can't answer everything, but I want to listen, and I want to hear, and I want us to hear. So Alicia, let's start with you. Is there anything you want us as your family to be doing right now, and maybe as we move forward?
Yeah, so I'll share kind of a personal level and then church level. As a member of the Christian faith, I would love for our Christian family, whether Caucasian, African American, or Hispanic, to rise up and protect Asian Americans. We're told in the Bible to care for widows, orphans, and foreigners, and even strangers. And then what the greatest commandment was to love our neighbors. Silence is empowering to people who are racist. Stand up when you see someone shouting racist slurs. Address family and friends right then and there if they are saying racist things about Asians at home, work, or church. And then learn the art of distraction when someone is physically being attacked in public. there's so many videos on social media of Asians being attacked and no one coming to their rescue. And that is just not okay in my book. And then I want to ask churches to validate what's happening in the Asian community, be bold and have conversations about joining us in speaking out against violence towards Asian. What does that look like? What type of resources does a church need to help understand this issue? Who in the congregation is currently doing social justice work, race equity, diversity and inclusion work? Gather those people together to normalize conversations about race in your church. Create justice circles for people who may be experiencing racist acts. Advocate for anti-racism from your pulpit and your sermons. All these different acts will build up and lead a church to step out in faith and action and love. And the truth is you can't do it by yourself. That's why we're called a body. And we need everyone to kind of step in to do their parts to help us, to help others, to help people who are discriminated against, persecuted. And we really do need everyone to do their part to help fight racism.
Alicia, I think that's fantastic. As you were talking, I just, so much of what the Apostle Paul addresses in terms of the gospel is the difference between Jew and Gentile and how that works out. And somehow I think often we've looked at that as a difference in religious background and not racial background. But if you look at that in terms of like racial background, essential to the gospel, the good news that we preach is figuring out how to live together as Jew and Gentile, or white and Hmong and African American and African. This is part of the gospel work, and somehow a particular reading of those passages can lead us to thinking, oh, this is just about religious background, not about working this out on the ground. So a lot of those suggestions I think are really, really valid. All of them are valid, but like those ones about preaching and having that lens towards racial justice, it's all there in the Bible. It's all right there for us if we're willing to step out and have that become part of what we're about. So great suggestions, Alicia. Pangfua, what do you want us to do?
I think that the majority of us in the North Central District will probably think that this is somebody else's problem, mainly because you may not come in contact with Asian Americans throughout your day or even through your year. So many of you may say this is, I can see the issue, but I don't really have anything to do with it. And I would just encourage all of us to look deep inside and examine ourselves and confront the xenophobia in ourselves. I believe that racism stems from ignorance, and ignorance then leads to fear. And in each of us, we have areas where we don't know what other people are like, and not knowing, then we fill in the blanks with whatever the media tells us, or with our own family upbringing, or even with our own personal fears. And those often get so big that they just take over how we interact with people when we see them. And so I would just encourage all of us, me included, to confront my own racism and my own fear of people who are really different than I am. Because ultimately we have to surrender that at the foot of the cross and to God, and to ask Him for help with this. I'm not saying that this is an easy issue that you just have to come alongside us and help us. I'm saying there's deep in each one of us a desire to put someone else down because we think they're a threat to our own existence, or that we just don't understand them. And I think for me, the biggest issue is when we're not even aware that we're doing it. And so you may see yourself as a upstanding citizen of the U.S. and a great Christian in your church, a loving person in your home. But what happens when you see someone who's really different? What happens when you see someone who the media has said, hey, this is they're to blame? Like, what does that bring up in you? And so I just encourage us to look at ourselves.
The interesting thing is, part of what we do is discipleship, right? And I would hope every part of our discipleship curriculum has a thing about loving your neighbor as yourself. maybe we need to consider if that's part of what we're teaching people and discipling people, at least a sub point under love your neighbor as yourself is, who is my neighbor, especially people who are different and of a different racial or ethnic background, and how do we actually love them as ourselves? Because I think you're right, this has to be confronted in all of us. I have to confront this in me. This isn't that person out there needs to confront this. This is my process of sanctification and becoming more Christ-like, is dealing with this. So that's good. Kong, how about for you? What do you want us to do?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's big, and so we can't solve it tomorrow. It's a big problem, and so I think it simply starts with, and I'm gonna echo Alicia's, just validating the experience of the oppressed. And so, you don't have to have the answers, the solutions to our problems. So often, I think we see the world through the lens of our eyes, and so if it doesn't affect me, it might not feel like it's real, and so. So I think simply just validating others' experience. Just start off with just being empathetic. Like, I hear you feeling like this. Does that sound right? And so just listening, just hearing them out. Again, just validating that they are experiencing something, and that, although you may not be experiencing it, and although it might not be true for you, it's true for them. It's their experience. And so validating and honoring their experience.
Good. Friends, you are courageous. Your willingness to share some of these hurts and pain and history for us to post on the internet for everyone to see. I can't thank you enough for the gift that you've given us today. And I guess I just want to say, we want to press in and be with you in this. We don't want you to be alone, and we don't want you to feel alone, because the part that you are of our body, especially as part of the North Central District, is so important and so valuable, just like every other part. It's and so we love you, we hear you, and we I'm speaking for us, response, but we commit to take that next step and understanding your struggle and locking arms with you in every way that we can. So thank you, guys. I'll see you all virtually at church on Sunday. So yeah. Well, thank you so much for sticking with us, for sitting and listening and learning about what's happening in the Asian American community, how COVID is affecting them, especially those members at River Life who are part of our body. A couple things are going to get posted along with this video. One is a link to the Asian American statement that Alicia mentioned. Another is an article that details the history of Asian American racism, maybe some of the roots of it, if you're interested in digging deeper. And the third thing are just some questions for reflection. If you were to want to take a group of people through this video cast, members of your church or others to share this with, some questions to think through, either for them or for your own reflection. So thank you so much. Thanks again to the leaders at River Life for teaching and sharing their experiences with us. See you next week.